Do you want to craft an amazing BDSM scene? These 3 foundational pillars will equip you with an easy-to-use formula for you to create scenes that will easily help DOMs and subs reach the heights of pleasure and the depths of subspace. I'm Brandon the Dom, let's dive in. You want the secret to crafting really great scenes? How you do a kinky action is more important than what you do. 2 DOMs can perform the exact same action on a sub, but the effect that they'll have on them will be completely different. So even if you're technically proficient at everything in BDSM, you still need to master some principles about delivering them in order to actually evoke the feelings that your submissive wants to feel and to fulfill the desires that she's craving. When I was first starting to learn how to become a Dom, I felt like there were some nights that I'd be with a woman, it would be very hot and steamy and passionate time, and others felt as mundane as washing dishes on a Tuesday night. And although I would like to have just chalked it up to the connection not being there between us, my self-improvement brain figured there was something more that I could do in order to improve this. I actually found a book called Sensational Scenes by Chief and learned a way that I could structure scenes that made them saying, "Oh my God, I can't stop touching myself thinking about last night," much more likely to happen. Now, of course, not every sex session or scene that you do is going to be mind-blowing, and sometimes that's not even the goal. But we can at least make it more likely. So before we get to the 3 pillars, the first thing I want to address is pre-planning a scene versus winging it. Because your first question is most likely going to be something of like, do I really need to pre-plan what I'm going to be doing? I want it to just be spontaneous. And if you listen to a lot of couples, they talk about, oh, I just want things to be spontaneous. Because pre-planning everything seems a little boring, especially for the submissive. If you're very rigid to a pre-planned scene, it's going to feel a little robotic. So my advice is, the more complicated, risky, and potential for harm that the scene has, the more planning you should undertake ahead of time. However, not every single scene needs to be that level of detail. Personally, I like to have my scenes have a general rough outline and a goal in mind when I'm entering into it. Once I'm in the scene though, I like to use my awareness to feel into what we're both experiencing and steering the scene in whatever direction it needs to go in order to reach our eventual goal. There's been times that I have entire elaborate scenes planned only to get into it and throw the entire thing out the window and just feel into the moment of what to do next. And this allows me to have a flexible structure that allows our personalities to come in, to shine, and for unexpected things to happen, because they always do. So with that in mind, let's address the 3 pillars to structuring a BDSM scene. The first pillar is your goal. And when I talk about a goal here, it's more of a general goal in mind, something that would be great to reach. Now, this is going to seem a little counterintuitive to what a lot of sex advice says, which tells you you shouldn't have a goal when engaging in sex. In fact, I have videos specifically on sexual performance anxiety that if you have that goal in mind, a lot of times it can put pressure on you to reach it, and then things are not going to work out the way you want them. And it can also make the ability to reach subspace, which I also have a video on, a lot less likely, which is often a goal of a lot of submissives. However, if you've consumed any of my other content, you know, as the role of the Dom, your responsibility is to set a vision and direction for the dynamic. Even if that dynamic is only in the bedroom and it's only for this scene, you're still leading it. So you have to have a general direction in which you're heading. So what gives? Have a goal, don't have a goal. The answer is to have a goal without the expectation of ever reaching that goal. Without a goal, you have no idea where you're headed or have no plan about how to actually reach that. However, you know there are actions that you can take towards making a woman orgasm, for her to reach subspace, and have one hell of a good time. Without any sort of aim though, you can't properly structure a sequence of things to actually reach those events. So instead, you set a goal, but don't put pressure on yourself or her to actually reach it. Instead, you have this mindset of, it'd be really cool if we were able to reach this, but if we don't, that's cool. We're still going to have a lot of fun along the way. This is a really great goal mindset to have, especially if, you know, she has difficulty orgasming and you're trying to help her reach her first orgasm, or a lot of people want to learn how to squirt, and putting all that pressure on yourself to try and squirt isn't going to make it happen. So you kind of want to have this general goal in mind, like, we're going to do these activities that make this thing more likely. However, it's totally okay if it doesn't happen. We're just going to have a lot of fun trying. One of the things that can help you to think about this goal is sort of setting a theme for the scene, which kind of gives it a purpose or a reason that it's happening. I mentioned Chief's sensational scenes earlier, and he describes 5 different themes. The first being training. So this is basically practice to help you get better at whatever you want to do. So if we're learning how to squirt, you can kind of have some training sessions that lead up to that. You may have heard of anal training or blowjob training. Those are all things to improve the skills for that particular sexual act. Another theme is arousal. So this is going to be most of your scenes, basically to achieve sexual pleasure, and with the pinnacle of that being orgasm. You could also have a scene that's more around play, where you're just enjoying the scene for what it is in that particular action. A lot of times people that engage in spanking, which I have a video on if you want to see, a lot of times those people are called spankos, and they just enjoy the act of spanking, either delivering it or receiving it, and will structure entire scenes around just spanking. And that basically allows them to really enjoy that act. Spanking can be very pleasurable, and sometimes you just want to experience that. You don't want the goal of sex and orgasm and all that attached to it. You might also have a theme of performance, especially if you're in the local community, you go to play parties, things like that. This is basically to recognize talent and demonstrate it to others, to kind of show it off. I know many people that play with whips, where whips is a huge part of it for them is the performance. It's a very eye-catching thing, and it takes a lot of skill to wield a whip, so it's fun to show it off. Another theme might be discipline, especially if you are doing some dominance and submission outside the bedroom, where you have rules and protocols set up. You may have discipline as part of your dynamic to make sure that those rules are obeyed, and correcting disobedient using punishments. Those are things that you're interested in. I'll leave a few articles below about setting rules for submissives, about punishments for submissives, and being able to structure a dynamic. Now, these themes are great to kind of get a general overview of what the scene's going to be about, what the purpose of it is. However, I like to think a little more nuanced and direct with my goal. For example, I may have the theme of arousal, but my more directed goal is to help my submissive ride the wave, as I call it, which is basically building up her arousal state to have one very intense orgasm that can turn into multiple subsequent orgasms. So you're basically edging her up, bringing her down, edging her up, bringing her down, edging her up, bringing her down, and then eventually having an intense orgasm that kind of blends into multiple orgasms. I'm going to mention another video I made on pleasure DOMs. A lot of the techniques that I mentioned in the pleasure DOM video can help your submissive to experience something like that. Or I may have the general theme of discipline, but my goal is to correct a very specific behavior and reinforce why this behavior is important to our dynamic. As you'll see as we continue into the other 2 pillars, it's this level of nuance, the why behind the actions that you're doing, that's going to set you apart from other DOMs. So before you start creating a scene, just think about, what is your goal of this? Why are you doing it? All right, pillar number 2 is sequencing. We basically want to sequence our scene in a way that it makes the goal more likely to happen. Remember, we're not attached to it happening, but it would be cool if it happened, and we're going to set things up so it's more likely to happen. So it's not only important what actions you choose to do, but in what order you choose to do them. Although there's a time and place for a fast and intense quickie, most of the time you're not going from 0 to 100 right off the bat. It's better to think of scenes more like a symphony, where each action plays its part, slowly building over time, reaching its crescendo, and then coming back down to baseline, leaving the listener pleased and satisfied. Description closely matches what the orgasm cycle is like, and this cycle serves as a good model for how we can start sequencing our scenes. That way it leaves a satisfying experience for the both of us. So you can break this down into 4 different parts. There's the lead-in, which basically prepares her mentally for what's to come, builds up excitement. Then there's the ramp up, which is basically going to deepen her mental state. All the actions here are to reinforce what you have going on and to warm her up and prepare her physically, basically getting all the blood moving around so that each one of your touches feels deeply satisfying. In the orgasm cycle, this is the plateau phase. Now that you've kind of let her into the scene, you've ramped her up, she's really excited, really aroused, really getting ready to go, then you can start to help her reach the release phase. This is basically the climax of your scene, the big of whatever you're doing. In our orgasm cycle, this is the orgasm. And then Towards the end of the scene, you're helping her to relax, bringing her back down and letting her recover. In the orgasm cycle, this is your resolution. The point of this is to consider how each one of the actions that you're going to do in the scene is going to increase her desire and get her excited, starting to lead her in. Which actions are going to increase or sustain that arousal as it builds up towards orgasm? Which actions are going to help tip her over the edge in her pleasure? And which ones are meant to bring her back down to earth? My advice is to start with actions that are low dominance and move to more extreme. I made a video on this talking about how you can develop different skills sort of as a roadmap for DOMs, starting with skills that are universal and low dominance and moving to more extreme dominance. So when you're starting the scene, you're going to want to start with the lower stuff and move to things that are more intense. And doing this is going to be a benefit for both of you. For her, it gets her familiar with the situation, what's going on, and with your dominance. This is going to allow her to sink more deeply into that headspace of being submissive. It's going to make her feel safe. She knows kind of what to expect, knows what your behavior is like, and it also warms her body up for more intense levels of domination later. For you, it helps you to get in tune with what her body is like, what her responses are like, allow you to gain more confidence as the scene progresses. With each successful spank, you get more confident, you have to think about it less, you can be more in tune with her. And it also makes sure that you have plenty of stuff to do throughout the scene. If you do all the intense stuff right up at the beginning, you're never going to be able to lead her up more towards that orgasm. You've already done 100, so there's no room more to go up. So start lower and move to more extreme as you go. All right, pillar number 3 is creating perfect moments. So these moments are going to be things that you remember long after the scene has ended. You're going to savor them and most likely masturbate to them later on. And to create a perfect moment within the scene, you basically need 3 elements to be in congruency with each other. So you need the intent, why you're performing the action. You need the energy, how you will be performing that action. And then you need the act itself, the single kinky act that you will be performing in that moment. So as you can see, as I'm describing this, we have moved through the 3 pillars where we started with our goal, which is very broad. What is this whole thing about? Then we started sequencing. Okay, how might we start laying out actions? And now we're picking specific actions to create perfect moments. I have this intention, this energy, and then the act itself. So let's break this down. Let's first talk about intention. Like all good things in life, you start with why. And yes, Simon Sinek is a kinky person in this video. Why are you performing that specific action in that moment? How does this intention move you closer to your overall goal? What feelings, what things or responses are you trying to evoke out of your submissive by performing this action? There are usually some common intentions that you have behind your actions. And these are going to be more general, like the themes that I described before. So the first is pleasure. You can focus on sensations, evoking emotions, increasing arousal, and aiming for orgasm. Most of the actions that you do are going to be able to create some sort of pleasure. But as you're doing that, I want you to think not so much about the sensations. Yes, those feel great. But what sort of emotions does this evoke and how are those pleasurable? Because something that's sexy can also be very humiliating, or something that brings up a lot of fear can also be very arousing. So pleasure is not always this positive emotion thing. Sometimes there's these other emotions, such as being humiliated, which can also be very pleasurable. And you might do an act that looks very humiliating, but is entirely pleasurable to her. The second intention that you might be thinking about is pressure. So this is basically an act that is used to increase the tension between you and her and amplify this dynamic of dominance and submission. So this could be physical pressure, such as putting her in bondage, pulling her hair, choking her, anything that really evokes, oh my goodness, I'm submitting to this person. Or it could be psychological pressure. So this might be calling her degrading names, making her go without panties in public, making her repeat herself and beg, basically anything that shows that power differential that you have ownership or you have control over her. And pressure is really the secret sauce of scenes. The more pressure you use, the more intense the scene becomes. And because of that, it's important that you be mindful of how much pressure your submissive can actually take. Because if it's too much for her and too intense, It may feel really great in the moment, but it can bring up a lot of shame, resentment, misunderstanding later on. So know the amount of levels that your submissive can actually take and balance very intense pressure-inducing acts with ones that pacify, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Another common intention behind an act in these scenes is pain. And this could be causing pain for pleasure, as in people that are masochists and really enjoy that, or causing pain for discipline, where the pain is not pleasurable and it's supposed to be something that brings attention to what they should be obeying. Now, just because I'm bringing up pain does not mean you need to include it in your scene. Again, if you go watch my video on pleasure DOMs, we talk a lot about pleasure and how you can craft scenes completely around pleasure. All of your intentions could be pleasure. However, a large part of the BDSM world lives in this dynamic between pain and pleasure. And I mean that both physically and psychologically. Earlier, I just talked about how praise and degradation, or praise and humiliation, can be used in combination with one another in order to make something very pleasurable. The intention may also be practice. Look, you need to build up your skills as a dom, they need to build up their skills as a submissive. So sometimes when you play, it's just literally to practice these techniques. This is going to help both of you to learn better and basically enhance your scenes later on. And then the last major intention is pacify. This is basically a removal of that pressure and helping to enter into a relaxed state, such as you do when you enter into aftercare. Of course, you're not always pacifying when you're entering into aftercare. A lot of times I will be mixing in certain pacifying acts throughout the scene, depending on where I am in the sequence. If I'm in the very beginning and I'm doing some spanking and I'm ramping up that spanking, but overall she's not, ready for more intense dominant acts, I'd be ramping up that spanking and then move to something that's more pacifying, like holding her back, rubbing the skin that I just spanked, kissing her, rubbing her head softly. Anything that helps her to relax, kind of release some of that tension. So a scene may be full of just one type of intention, such as a focus on pleasure in a total sensual worship type scene, or the intention might be practice the entire time. When you're doing a rope scene and you got the YouTube tutorial up and you're like, okay, I need to tie this. Let's see how this works. It's not necessarily pleasurable, although it might be a little bit, but most of the intention is practice. However, the best scenes usually include most of these intentions sprinkled throughout. And that's because a lot of these intentions exist on polarized spectrums. So pain versus pleasure, pacify versus pressure, where alternating between those two extremes can really create a nice roller coaster of emotions and sensations and experience. So a skillful dom is going to be able to alternate between these intentions. And is going to be able to read into the moment of like, okay, what sort of act should I be doing next? What is my intention behind that? While also being able to sequence them in a way that leads towards our ultimate goal. Right, now let's talk about energy. So if a kinky action is basically a verb, it's what you're doing, the energy is the adjective that accompanies it. How are you doing it? Every single action that you do can be delivered in a multitude of different ways. And those different ways are going to make the receiver, your submissive, feel a certain way. So energy is basically the passion, the vibe, the personality, the oomph behind whatever you're doing. So let's just take spanking as an example. In spanking, you could deliver it very sternly. So a serious disciplinarian type dom could deliver a spanking as a harsh, aggressive swat in order to bring attention to the submissive about the rule that they broke, the transgression that they made, and deliver pain in order to punish. On the flip side of that, you can also lovingly spank. So a compassionate dom might be giving a repetition of very sensual, stinging, but pleasurable spanks. And this might be in order to pacify the submissive's neurotic mind, helping them get out of their head and all the thoughts that they're having and into the sensations of their body. And this is going to help her prepare her for more pleasure later. You could also deliver a spanking very playfully. So a jovial dom might deliver a quick smack on the ass of his submissive in order to kind of catch her off guard and increase the pressure of the moment. Just reminding her of who's in charge and what's happening in this dynamic. Of course, all of those could be one and the same person, those different kind of personality types to the spanking, depending on what the intention of the scene is. The important thing is to match the energy, the way you're delivering that spank, with the intention of the moment. If you deliver a spanking that's too harsh and your intention was for it to be pleasurable and your submissive is not a pain slut, then the energy that you're using is incongruent with what your intention was. And it's just going to feel weird and out of place. And this is what makes scenes kind of feel clunky. Now, as an important part of energy, this how you're delivering it, confidence and competence are important parts of that, no matter how you are delivering that action. Now, part of you may be saying, Brandon, I've never done these things before. How the hell am I supposed to be confident in it? And that, my friend, takes practice and exposure. So to gain competence, basically the belief that you can do these kinky actions, you need to learn from mentors, workshops, videos, or courses about how to actually do those skills and things that you want to do. And then you need to practice them over and over again. I flogged a pillow like 100 times before I ever touched another person with it. Now, some techniques are going to actually require her to be there in order to actually practice. So when that occurs, just turn it either into a fun game of like, hey, I want to learn this thing with you. I'm probably not going to be great at it, but I think we'll have a lot of fun learning it in the meantime. Or just have it as part of a regular act of your regular repertoire every time you have sex. So if you're learning spanking, have spanking be a part of every single one of your scenes until you're really good at it and it becomes second nature to you. Now, to gain confidence, the belief in yourself that it's okay to be doing these things, you need to use the techniques that you're learning on a person and be exposed to owning your desires and exposed to the reactions that they have. The more times that you perform an action, the easier it becomes, and the more that you'll probably want to do it. You basically need these actions to become second nature to you and almost be able to predict what her reaction is going to be because you've done it so many times. You know what usually happens after this action is performed. That is the confidence that's going to allow you to be like, okay, if I structure in this way, usually this sort of action occurs. And when you're starting out as a dom, it's probably going to feel weird and unnatural. And I promise you that everyone that started out as a dom, myself included, goes through the shaky hands and weak commands phase. You're going to be bad at the beginning, and that's okay. Just own it and let them know that you're just starting to learn these things. Most of the time, your partner is going to be pretty nice and understanding, and they're just going to be excited to be doing it. The worst thing that you can do is lie about how great you are and then underdeliver later. All right, now let's talk about the last piece of this, which is the actual kinky action that you're going to be choosing. You should get this idea by how I've structured this video and leaving the kinky action for very last, and honestly, it's going to be a very small part of this entire thing. It's not as important about what you're doing. It's more important about how you're doing it. And everything that we've talked about up to this moment has been talking about how are we doing it? Why are we doing it? That's the juicy part. But of course, we still have to pick what we're doing. When you're picking your kinky actions, you want to make sure that it's within their boundaries. If you watch some of my other videos, like on creating a sex menu, you'll know that there's lots of different kinky actions that you could pick. And if you've talked with your partner, hey, I like these ones I don't like, and you're going to have a better idea of what things that you should be putting into your scene. The important part here is that it matches your energy and your intention for that moment. Additionally, every action sort of has a mild to wild spectrum, if you will. For example, bending her over the bed to give her a few spankings in the bedroom might be pretty mild for spanking, depending on the person. Where on the more wild end of the spectrum, you could be taking her into a public changing room, telling her to hike up her dress, removing her panties, and bending her over your knee in order to give her a few swats. So here, I recommend starting out low and mild and moving towards more extreme and wild as the scene progresses. Now, if you want an example of how I have used these 3 pillars in order to craft a scene that I've actually done before, I'm going to leave a link down to the article. It's a sexual impact scene, so basically takes through different phases of using impact play, using spanking, things like that, with the goal to tie pain and pleasure together and an energy that's a little more rough and aggressive, and basically leads her through 3 different sets of doing impact play, and then when reaching orgasm, really tying pain and pleasure together. So using some pain while she's orgasming to kind of link those in her head. So I'll leave a link down below to the article. You can check that out. Now, if you need some ideas of what to fill this scene with, what sort of activities to put in there, earlier I just mentioned about a sex menu. That's basically a tool that you can use to find out all the different kinky acts that you're into, that they're into, be able to say how much you want it and leave some notes about what that looks like for you. It's a great communication tool, and I created a video for it, basically explaining how to use this tool with a free download link in there as well. So watch that video. And until next time, thank you so much for your time and attention.